Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on and talk about some books. If you're not already aware, around my birthday when I turned 25 in 2022, I decided that I was going to make a list of 26 books that I wanted to read before I turned 26 with the aim of actually succeeding this time because with my 25 before 25, I failed miserably. The only way that I'm going to be able to actually succeed for this challenge, I feel, is one, set books that I actually want to read, which I've done, and two, to update you guys every month if I can on the books that I have read. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. This is a book that I did a try a chapter tag for, I think ages and ages ago, and I tried the first chapter, really loved it, proceeded to jump into the rest of the book, and then I think put it down because there was another project I was working on, or I can't remember what it was, but I put it down knowing that I wanted to come back to it, and I got really excited to read more of this book. As for what it's about, it follows Addie and her sister who are on an epic road trip to Scotland to attend a friend's wedding, only to get into a car accident. Unfortunately, the car they've crashed into just so happens to have Addie's ex and his douchey best friend in the car, and there was a very tumultuous breakup between those two, so she's needless to say not keen to see him again. Because one of the cars is totaled and they're heading to the same wedding, they all decide to drive together in the one viable option left, and it's all about their road trip to Scotland, confronting everything that happened in the past, and you get sort of this dual timeline where you go back in time to see their relationship in real time. Naturally, angst, tension, all that sort of thing, dual POV, seeing the romance blossom. I thought that I would love this book, but I actually DNF'd it about halfway through. I really lost interest in this story because at the end of the day, it just was the same thing over and over again. You got to see the relationship grow, but then they were facing the same difficulties with this friendship group, and at the end of the day, the relationship itself was very surface level. You don't get to see much of the depth of each of the characters. Maybe that's because I gave up on this book halfway through, but I just lost interest in their story. There was no tension outside the sort of original car scene where they come together and you figure out that there was some massive huge breakup that nobody seems to know the true story of except for the two people involved. Plus it relied really heavily on just very boring stereotypes, and I think the main heroine was sort of cast off as being this hysterical person who can't keep her emotions in check, and I just was not keen to follow that perspective. I was not keen to follow this relationship, so I DNF'd this book, unfortunately. Next up, I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I really did not expect to like this book. I thought it was one of those books that was all hype, no substance, but I was wrong. I loved this so much. I gave it 5 stars. I'm so glad that I actually gave this a chance, and I'm kind of keen to read the fan service book, It Starts With Us, and I say fan service because everybody says that there's no real reason for that book to exist other than to give you a bit more time with Atlas and Lily. As for what this book is about, it follows Lily, who after a very difficult funeral for her father, who she had a very conflicting relationship with, she has a chance encounter with a neurosurgeon called Ryle Kincaid on a rooftop where they agree to have a one-night stand, only for it to be interrupted by him being called by the hospital, I think, and Lily just brushes it off as a missed opportunity. Later on though, she finds that she bumps into him again and a sort of relationship develops between the two of them until Lily starts to go through old childhood belongings and she finds these letters that she'd written to Ellen DeGeneres but never actually posted, about a young homeless boy that she fell in love with while she was in high school by the name of Atlas Corrigan. The thing that really strikes me about this book is that it is actually inspired by Colleen Hoover's own mother's experience, so it's very emotional, very hard-hitting. I would definitely suggest reading the trigger warnings. It was definitely difficult to read on that front, but also an incredibly beautiful book. This book honestly had me so conflicted about so many of the characters in this story, particularly Ryle, because as Colleen Hoover sort of said in her author's note, you're positioned to sort of fall in love with him and not see hatred and the dysfunction and the horror brewing under the surface until about halfway through the book when those first sorts of situations start to occur between him and Lily. Whilst I wasn't surprised at all when that first act of sort of physical violence happened, considering his attitude and his behavior towards his own family, it still made me want to bawl, and it still had me really reeling and hurting because of everything that Lily had said about how she would never stay with a man after he had been violent towards her because of her own experiences. But then, as happens in so many domestic violence cases, she was conflicted about leaving him because she believed it was just a one-off situation. She believed it would never happen again. I love the insight into the sort of innocence of Lily through that childhood relationship with Atlas and through the writing of those letters. They definitely felt like they were written by a young woman falling in love for the first time. I loved seeing that relationship blossom, and it was a very, very interesting juxtaposition. Sorry, I struggled to say that word, but it was a very interesting juxtaposition seeing the really, really beautiful and innocent and blossoming relationship as a young woman between Atlas and Lily, and then this sort of more mature and more complicated and more dysfunctional relationship between Ryle and Lily, and seeing her try to figure those two out in her head, especially because she starts to bump into Atlas again in her adult life. This book was so immersive. I could not stop reading it. I think it was perfectly paced. I think the writing was really beautiful. Like I said, in those letters that Lily wrote when she was 15, 16 years old, you could definitely feel that sort of young, immature, innocent voice. I basically read this book in one sitting and I absolutely loved it. So 5 out of 5 stars for this, and I'm so glad that I gave it a chance, and I'm actually keen to give some more Colleen Hoover books a go because this one was so good. Next up, I read Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, which I gave 4 stars. Really, really enjoyed this book as well. It is about a witch by the name of Lou who is living in France during the time of the sort of French monarchy. I couldn't exactly place when, but she's living in France trying to hide who she is because the church and the monarchy are very much persecuting witches at this point in time, until she gets herself into a situation where I believe she steals a priceless belonging and it puts her under threat. So she decides to get married to a notorious witch hunter called a chasseur named Reed, and she decides to hide who she is so he'll never find out, obviously, because he would probably kill her. I've probably done a horrible job of explaining the plot, but it's just one of those books that for some reason I cannot get it straight in my head, but I really, really loved it. Immediately after reading this book, I went and bought the other 2 in the series. As for my general thoughts, I absolutely loved the character of Lou. I thought she was so sassy and so sure of herself and amazing, whilst also having this heart of gold that made you so sure that she would literally risk her life in order to save the people that she loves, and she did so many times in this story, especially towards the end with those big angsty tension-filled scenes where she gets kidnapped, and it's just go, go, go from there. It is so good. As for Reed, I liked that he wasn't this sort of golden boy hero with no issues. I liked that he had issues. I liked that he had a lot of learning and growing to do, and that he definitely did as he began to question everything that he'd always believed about this sort of monarchy and the society that he lived in, and the real reason why they were persecuting these witches. I think the side characters were absolutely stand out as well. I loved Coco. She was like the perfect best friend, and then I think Ansel was an absolute cinnamon roll. The atmosphere was absolutely palpable in that you could feel the constant tension and stress that Lou was under in being literally surrounded by the enemy and having to hide who she is, because every time they use magic, just so you know, there's like a smell, I think, that sort of permeates the space, and so every time she accidentally used magic or had to use magic to protect herself, she then had to like stressively find a way to cover up the smell of this magic so no one would catch her. But naturally the people that she's living with are very, very in tune to this particular smell, given they're witch hunters, especially her husband, because he is such a good witch hunter. So it was just this stress, and the tension in the atmosphere of the read was so, so palpable. Plus the tension between Lou and Reed was incredibly, incredibly amazing, because you could see their hatred of each other turning into, at the very least, commitment, and finally blooming into sort of love and trust. So it was just amazing to kind of watch that grow. I thought the plot was paced really, really well. I liked that you sort of found out Lou's secrets as other people in the storyline found out Lou's secrets, so you never really knew her history, where she was from. I loved that that was sort of slowly revealed throughout. I loved the way the romance unfolded. I basically finished this book within 24 hours. My intrigue was so high. I just really loved this story. I thought the logic was great. I thought the magic system made sense, and I'm keen to watch everything grow as we get into the next book in the series. And lastly, I read The Passenger by Ulrich Alexander Boschwitz. Now, I think what is most interesting for me about this book, which I gave 4.5 stars, is the author's own history. And I'll read you the sort of passage that's included at the beginning of the book to explain who this person is and why this book is so fascinating in the way that it's written. It says, Ulrich Alexander Boschwitz was born in Berlin in 1915. He left Germany in 1935 for Oslo, Norway, studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, and wrote 2 novels, including The Passenger. Boschwitz eventually settled in England in 1939, although he was interned as a German enemy alien after war broke out, despite his Jewish background, and subsequently shipped to Australia. In 1942, Boschwitz was allowed to return to England, but his ship was torpedoed by a German submarine, and he was killed along with all 362 passengers. He was 27 years old when he died. 27 years old. That is only like a year and a bit away from how old I am, and he wrote 2 books one of which this one was absolutely incredible. This book follows a man named Otto Silbermann, who is a Jewish German man living in Germany around the time of the Kristallnacht, when Jewish people were essentially being rounded up by the police, by the Nazis, and forced into concentration camps. As they're knocking down on his door, Otto manages to escape with the help of his Christian wife, who then goes to live with her family, and he spends the entirety of this book basically hopping on and off trains all around Germany, trying to firstly just escape Germany and trying to get into Belgium, I believe, and then just trying to evade capture. He meets all sorts of interesting people along the way, all sorts of people with different perspectives on the world at that point in time in Germany. Obviously, he meets Jewish people who obviously force him to face the realities of what it's like to be a Jewish person and the ostracism and the hate that they face on the day-to-day. But then he also meets people who are sort of the Aryan race, as they were called at that point in time. So people who aren't persecuted and generally believe or have been brainwashed into believing that what is going on is right. And it's really, really interesting how meeting those people and talking to those people kind of put Otto into this mind space where he hates himself, his own religion, and his own people. He begins to see his own people in this very negative way because he is, as well, is being brainwashed by the ideologies and this scapegoating that's going on for the Jewish people in Germany and all over Europe at this point in time. It is honestly a fascinating read. I think Otto is the definition of an unforgettable character, as you can literally see spending the whole book in his perspective as his mind sort of devolves, or his state of mind and his mental stability, I guess, as his whole world is thrown up and just all over the place, and he's put through all these different situations. He's confronted by police, he's having to run away constantly, he's having family telling him, no, you can't come and escape with us because you're a threat to us, we have to escape separately to you. He's being abandoned by everybody he knows and loves, and so his mental state just devolves throughout this book to the point where I think he literally hands himself in. All in all, it is just a very, very fascinating book. I think the writing is absolutely beautiful. I would recommend this to anyone who is interested in this time period. It is not an easy read, but it is incredible. So 4.5 stars to this one. So these are my 4 latest reads in my 26 before 26. You guys will have to wait until my next update to see what is next, what comes next, but let me know down below if you've read any of these books, loved them, hated them, or just what you're reading at the moment. I love talking to you guys and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It is a super, super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!